So I think first thing that will be useful for the audience, I think, would be kind of a quick round of introduction so they understand and know what your roles are. So Mark, if you could start with your role and what you do at your company.
My name is Mark. I'm involved with information security at Loblaw Companies Limited. We're a company based out of Canada. We're involved with one of the leaders for pharmacy and retail in Canada. We have about 200,000 employees across Canada, both full-time and part-time. My role is specifically around assessing security solutions that are going to be used in our different platforms and how we address our very specific threat landscape.
Shahar.
Hello, my name is Shahar. I'm CIO for Exabeam. Exabeam is making a next generation SIEM, making our advanced analytics technology available for companies to get more out of their SIEM. And I've been with Exabeam for about a year as CIO. Previously, I've been with Imperva, heading both infrastructure and CISO for Imperva. And at Exabeam, I wore two hats, kind of CIO, leading the IT and the InfoSec operations, as well as in charge of building a cloud product in our cloud SIEM offering, which we recently announced at RSA.
And hi, guys. My name is Jason Lau. I'm the Vice President of Information Security for CoreLogic. CoreLogic is another one of those companies that you don't know, but you really touch all the time. If you guys have done a mortgage loan, you've probably, on the back end, that probably involved CoreLogic anywhere from 10 to 20 different times, from the credit check process to the home appraiser, to the mortgage risk data that we provide to the mortgage lending companies. So my job is to protect the data. We've been very aggressive in moving all of our applications, sensitive data or otherwise, to Google Cloud. So my focus is really cloud security and cloud automation.
My name is Derrick Tomorrow. I work for eBay, and most of you probably know what eBay is. We are not just a large marketplace, but we also have many other brands that sit under eBay. So we have StubHub and a bunch of other classifieds groups that help users around the world find goods and services in their local communities. So my main responsibility is kind of helping to plan and research and develop what our next-gen services platform looks like. So whether it is an extension of a hybrid cloud environment where we may have data that exists in a public cloud environment, or how we further enhance our existing security program to protect against next-gen threats.
My name is Njenga, and I work for the Home Depot. I'm a staff security engineer, and my role at the company is focused on looking for tools that provide us with risk assessment or enhances our ability to do risk assessment across the enterprise, both in the cloud space and on-premise. And with everything shifting to cloud workloads, we are looking at different tools. We look at different tools, validate that they can provide the same visibility that we require, so that we can provide our leadership with the required risk assessment profiling for all of the workloads, whether they're in the cloud or they are on the on-premise space.
Perfect. Thank you, John. I think one thing that will be useful for the audience would be to understand, what kind of workloads you're running on GCP and how you use GCP. So, John, if you start from your side, other way this time, anything that you can share and that people can relate to in the audience?
So we have different workloads that actually run. Obviously, we have different business processes, some that are customer-facing workloads, some that are used internally. We run a hybrid cloud on-premise environment. It's a large environment, so we have different tool sets, we have different requirements, and sometimes with what the cloud provides with auto-scaling, it's very obvious that we also have to, from a security perspective, be able to assess what's happening within those environments in the same way we do it on the on-premise.
Perfect.
I can't really talk about a lot of what we run in Google Cloud, and probably a lot of people in the audience can relate to that. But what we are doing is what my responsibility is planning for how some of our brands are planning, what that looks like. So a lot of it has been how do we replicate what we currently have on premise within a cloud environment. So, our approach has been, taking it from the host or the application, to egress, or if not in the reverse. So, part of what I'm actually talking about tomorrow is in further detail is our test use case of how we were able to test Google's perimeter defense mechanisms with Cloud Armor, and integrated with a partner solution called Reblaze, and that was pretty much our use case for how we're able to protect or potentially protect our workloads in Google Cloud.
So for CoreLogic, we're relatively new to Google Cloud. We started about a year ago. We're now at about maybe 750 projects and about 7,000 servers, I think, altogether. It's been really interesting because I think that one of the things we see from the security side is that the amount of real estate that we have to protect is really expanding really fast. So we've got the on-prem data centers, we've got data centers from mergers and acquisitions. We had an existing footprint of AWS. We're moving those into GCP. So there's a lot of things in motion, and so there's a lot of things that we kind of have to keep our eyes on. Especially from the M&A side, we'll acquire anywhere from 2 to 3 companies a year. And I think now it's more common to acquire companies that actually have their own cloud presence. So for us, it's really about how can we unify and centralize them, and how quickly can we get them out of their cloud environment into our kind of managed GCP environment.
Okay, and Jason, just to kind of add on your G Suite, I think you have a unique kind of use case on leveraging pieces of G Suite. So if you could share some thoughts around G Suite as well, how do you use it?
Yeah, certainly. So I think we like most companies started out with the Office 365. As we moved closer to GCP, we found that we were just kind of getting better value out of the G Suite product line. But that came with its own challenges, right? I think that when we looked at traditional content filtering, that kind of gave us this very binary approach to you can allow traffic or you can block traffic. And we needed to bring in partners and solutions like Netscope CASB to kind of really open up those connections to say, well, we want to do more finesse things, like maybe we want to have our users access our G Suite instance, but not let them access their personal G Suite instance. Or we want to kind of pop open the session and really see what people are putting into S3 buckets. And so without kind of more modern solutions like Netscope, we really didn't have the ability to address things from that granularity. So today, we're not only thinking about what they're accessing, but we're also thinking about the activities that they're doing. And it gives us the ability to kind of have more finesse rules, like allow people to download from different environments, but we're more focused about preventing what they upload to non-sanctioned environments. Perfect.
Thank you. And Shahar, you have a unique kind of role and position of a security company running a SaaS service on GCP, where your reputation and protecting that SaaS service is critical to the business. So in that role, share a little bit about what you're running on GCP, and what was the key challenges that you've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we came to design our SaaS offering, and we were looking at kind of what's most important to us, and obviously security. A lot of companies say that security is a top priority, but it's really not. and I kind of feel that we really try to do it. At Exabeam, put it as top of mind. Because this is what we do, like we're a security software company, and if our customers cannot trust us, then we would not have business. And so that's why we put it as a top priority, and as we design the product and keep on making progress, this is something that we always take care of, and even if it sometimes slow us down, and I think that most people here would recognize that sometimes you have to slow down to get this done right. So this is what we're trying to do, and we feel that the Google Cloud provide us with a good platform to do that. And maybe one more comment about partners' offerings. I kind of feel that 3 years ago this wasn't the case, right? You would sit in such a session, and there are maybe a few names on the slideshow, and not all of them have good solutions, and that has changed. I think that for those of you who are considering a move, the tools are there. Kind of connect with your vendors and ask them what's available. And you might be surprised that most of them do have now tools that will work in these environments.
Perfect.
Not really sure I can follow that up, but so someone like Derrick can't speak to specifically what we have in GCP, but I can say Loblaw is we're a hybrid and poly-cloud environment. We have a couple of different clouds, and we're using a hybrid of on-prem and cloud infrastructure. We're looking to migrate many of our on-prem apps or our legacy apps to the cloud. We're also looking for cloud for some of our web-facing applications that we use for customer-facing, as well as some of our data analytics platforms.
Perfect. And Mark, starting with you for the next round, when you were designing the security architecture for Google Cloud, how did you think about partner solutions, what roles they would play? Any partners you want to mention that played a key role? And for the benefit of the audience, what functions did they perform? And when folks are thinking about building a security architecture, which are the different pieces they should be thinking about?
Yeah, for sure. So going back to your first slide that some of you may have seen, it was you have to take a couple of steps back. Google has a responsibility for the cloud, but that isn't to be. You shouldn't confuse that with they're responsible for everything. And some people have looked at cloud as a mechanism to defer all of the risk or all of your security problems to Google, and then you don't have to worry about anything. The customer is responsible for security for what you put in the cloud. So your workloads, your data, your source codes. You have to make sure that you implement solutions or architecture solution to address that. That starts with building your threat model and understanding what specific threats actually can potentially exist with that migration. So some of the steps or some of the things that we've looked at is network traffic and looking at a next generation firewall for insight into what traffic is actually happening and what's going on your cloud project is very important. Also, with many companies being fairly immature and understanding how the cloud is configured and what you can potentially do, looking at solutions that monitor the configuration and all the different switches that you can potentially configure is very important as well. And then finally, with many organizations looking to move to containerized applications and moving off of traditional infrastructure, you want to make sure that those containers are actually being secured, and then you're doing everything that you can and leveraging the learnings of some of your partners to make sure that you're doing the right thing for security for those migrations.
Perfect, thank you. And Shahar, from your perspective, and feel free to share as much detail you feel comfortable sharing. From a security company perspective, you have seen all the products, you know all the players. When you had to design your security, what were the different components and pieces you were thinking about? How did partner products help you provide that comprehensive answer?
Yeah, so Mark here talked about a few, but I want to take a slightly different angle. I think that when you start, especially when you are new to cloud environment, you need to look at what is your hygiene, what's your IT hygiene, what's your environment hygiene, where you store your stuff, because you can buy all these products, but if there's passwords.txt on your desktop, then no product in the world is going to help you overcome that. So I think that one of our first priority was to have our environment clean and hygiene and everything get automated through we use some partner products like HashiCorp have good products for cloud, as well as we use a Cloud WAF and DDoS mitigation service. And because these are things we felt that we would be able to leverage a partner. But for those who are just starting their journey, I think a number one priority should be get your environment clean, and then use the partner products to cover other aspects that that hygiene doesn't solve.
Perfect, Jason.
So I think there's really kind of two components when we think about partner products. There's the product, but then there's the partner side of it as well. And I feel like, yes, they have good solutions, but I think that there's a lot to be leveraged from working with good partners as well. I think 5 years ago, I was more the security guy that would go work with a partner and say, here's a blueprint, build this exact thing for me. And now I think I'm more of the security professional that says, here's some problems that I'm trying to solve, can you help me with it? And I think, so yes, we're looking at the solution, but I think as we look at the partners, we're kind of looking for their expertise in the space, especially what is their expertise with Google Cloud. Is it something that they support kind of ancillary? Maybe they mostly support AWS and they have a Me Too approach to Google Cloud, or are they truly a Google partner and they've really thought through their approach of implementing their solution in Google Cloud? But to me, it's twofold value. It's ideally, yes, we want a good solution, but we really want a good partner who can kind of understand our context, who can kind of grow with us, and we can kind of leverage a lot of the expertise that they've built up over the years.
So for me specifically, it was feature parity, and I don't necessarily mean feature parity from the perspective of like, hey, we're looking for exactly what we run on-prem, but also looking at potentially deficiencies that you have. You know, if you have this exercise where you can actually build something from scratch and build something new, then what you're looking for is potentially looking for maybe there's something you didn't look at, or maybe there is a new feature that is now available that your partner might be dealing with. And so then you go through that build versus buy mentality. Well, of course, we could all probably build it and spend the cycles actually doing that. But if somebody's out there doing it better and doing it well and has a bit of maturity and longevity in the service that they built, then you've kind of been able to instill a bit of confidence in that vendor and be able to realize that you can partner with them and see how you can work together to kind of build the service, build this product. So what I'd say is don't be afraid of finding things that might be not running properly or might not be working properly. But if anything, you might be able to find that in the partner that you partner up with.
And Derrick, just double clicking on the thoughts that you mentioned about using Cloud Armor, how to think about application security. If you could share your thoughts, you have done a lot of groundbreaking work there.
Yeah. So
how should companies think about application security generally?
Yeah. So we deal with a lot of bots, and bots both being good and both being bad. And so we were looking at ways of being able to have this portability aspect of being able to deploy something no matter where. At the same time, also understanding that potentially there were some things that we might not have been catching. So being able to take advantage of a lot of the behavioral aspects of traffic that a lot of companies are kind of looking into the space and then partnering up with Reblaze and seeing how they've been able to kind of excel at a lot of the visibility that we might not have been able to see is something that we found pretty intriguing and led us to kind of go through this test scenario. Perfect.
Thank you.
Just to follow up with the comments from my panelists, there are when you look at especially hybrid environments where you're going from traditionally on-premise environments and trying to secure workloads in the cloud space, most of the time we tend to approach them with the mentality of what we knew about in the on-premise space. However, because the infrastructure and the visibility doesn't always exist in the same way in the cloud space, you have to be very focused on at least working with vendor products that provide you some sense of visibility for the different workloads that you have. If you're primarily, say, compute engine heavy, then you want to look at products that give you visibility from both the network layers and then from the compute engine and how the cloud as a space and all the services that are running in it are interconnected, because that's the only way you have a really good way of trying to make sure that your policies, your baseline policies, from a CAS perspective, from a DLP perspective, from a vulnerability management perspective, are covered by the tool sets that you decide to put in place. We work with different vendor products. Some of them were actually listed on the slide previously. Qualys is one of them, plus a couple others. We're also looking at the ability to have visibility across the cloud space to see all of the services, connectivity, and how that is laid out. Then create and come up with strategies around securing all of the in the Cloud One space.
Perfect. And Mark?
Yeah, I think I'll add just one comment back to that, and kind of listening to all the responses, is that if you're migrating to the cloud, you might not have an app that's perfect, or you might not have a workload that's really secure, really clean. You have to kind of think about how the risk and the threats are changing from moving from an on-premise environment into the cloud. And this also gives you the unique opportunity to look at what's working and what's not working. If you're using a partner solution right now that maybe isn't going to migrate to the cloud that well, you have the opportunity to say, well, maybe this isn't going to work out for me, and I need to change that. And that's one of I'd say the journeys that we had at Loblaw is we had a few partners that maybe just didn't work out so well, in the cloud, and we had to say, well, we have to pivot. We have to make sure that we're going to be 100% successful, and having that loyalty to one specific partner maybe isn't the right thing to do.
Mark, there are a few people in the audience who are working for security vendors. What are you expecting your security vendors to do in order for these companies to be successful with you and have a true partnership with you?
That's a really tough question, and so it was specifically about being like cloud native and really having that, like taking a number of steps back and saying, well, we have to do things differently in the cloud. It's not about traditional infrastructure anymore. So what's different in the cloud, and how do we make sure that what we're building is going to be is going to take into the principles that we're looking to do in the philosophy of cloud and DevOps, and how are we building it for that?
And I think this is a great question. Anybody in the audience wants to chime in. What would be the right security partner as folks are evaluating different companies they want to partner with for security? What are the key things that you think are important? In addition to what Mark said, right? If you're thinking about a partner, what would be the right characteristics of that partner?
So a lot of that, at least from my perspective, is just the portability. So whether it's something that you can run on-prem as well as running in cloud, and make it that very seamless. If anything, I think that's where some vendors might not have focused on one area as opposed to the other, but it's that portability factor that makes it easy to be able to transition. We got really good at being able to migrate workloads, but if we're not able to migrate an appliance or migrate a product, then we essentially kind of pigeonholed ourselves into backhauling traffic back to a data center in order to be able to have that same level of protection.
Yeah. And I think, go ahead.
Yeah, so kind of to echo on that, I think we look for partners who can help us in multi-cloud environments. I think our desire and intent is everything in GCP, but our reality is always going to be, there's going to be some laggard application that's built specifically to AWS. It's going to take us a long time to get out of. So we do need consistent coverage across multiple cloud environments. And then I think the other thing is that today when we look at any solution, we just won't take any solution unless it has a RESTful API interface. Because if that vendor cannot let us integrate and orchestrate with other solutions, we're not even interested in looking at that solution at that point.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other comments on this?
And to add on to what he just stated, especially when you have multi-cloud environments, you want to have that integration, especially at the API level, so that your provision of, say, the reporting or even integration with existing security tool sets, be they on-premise or be they in the cloud space, is seamless and appears the same. Because when you have people going to different tools, then you end up with the same traditional risks that we have in on-premise environments, multiple tool sets, different data sets, and not enough integration.
Perfect. So I think other thing that will be, useful for the audience will be to understand what were the key lessons learned as you went on your journey to Google Cloud or any other public cloud in general. And I was thinking more in terms of not just the technical lessons learned, but organizationally how security should be done in the cloud, how organizations should be set up, how the roles should be defined. If there are any key nuggets that you guys want to share, I think that will be useful for the audience. Mark, if you could start with you.
I think what really helped us out when we started our journey was having a team that we dedicated to cloud migration and adopting cloud principles. Forget about tech and forget about partners and the workloads. The first thing you need to consider when you want to adopt the cloud is philosophy, and what you really adopting those cloud principles, adopting DevOps principles, and making sure everybody's on the same page with what you're looking to achieve with going to the cloud. What are the actual benefits that your organization is going to be getting from the cloud, and how are you going to implement those? So having that core team that really were the bleeding edge of understanding what those principles were was very advantageous for making it successful right off the bat.
And to echo what Mark said, I think that, my learning is that, sure, cloud, a lot of things are easier in cloud, but there are no shortcuts. Like, you have to have processes, you have to have planning in place, and that is my, my key takeaway from cloud migration and my first advice to people who are kind of starting their journey.
Yeah, so when I first wrote my first cloud security reference model, I totally had it wrong. So I basically had the statement that said, I want to make cloud just as secure as on-prem. And the fallacy was in that statement was that I was aiming for parity, when really, if we think about it, we go to cloud not to co-locate, but we go to cloud to transform. We transform our applications. We move to infrastructure as code, blue-green environments. We have to do the same thing from a security perspective, and we really have to transform what we're doing. But more importantly, I think that we can never set our goals too high from a cloud security perspective. We always have to define what is my best case scenario, and even if you have to temporarily take reality and put it to the side to say, I want an environment that is always doing compliance auditing 24/7 in real time. I want scans to be happening as things are spun up. We have to hold those as the ideals, and I think that just as we're seeing cloud transform and security transform, I think what you're hearing here is that I think as security professionals, we're also transforming our approach, and we are moving more towards automation, more towards bot-driven triggers, because we know that in these cloud environments, they're so ephemeral and they move so fast. That's the only real way we're going to keep up.
So my takeaway is don't be afraid to break things. What kind of at first what Mark alluded to was like, don't be afraid to break culture. A lot of times it's the mentality of that, you can only do things a certain way, and by breaking that, you can actually technically do things a little bit better. But don't be afraid to actually break your environments. We were in a fortunate situation where, we reached out to our customer engineer and said, hey, we want to DDoS Google, and probably within 3 seconds he said, yeah, let's do it. It'd be great. He was really, really excited. And when you realize that you have partners that want to see you break things, you want to see these kind of failures because that's the only way we learn. These environments, as ephemeral as they are, they're great learning experience, especially if you are first, migrating to, to public cloud for the first time. But at the same time, too, you're also going to find deficiencies possibly in your automation process or in your build process. You'll find failures that you'll learn from, and you'll learn how to, make your environments, more resilient and better.
In our environment, one of the issues that we run into is orchestration, because we have different business units, and some of them have, even though we are the same company, we have different approaches based on what the business value the team is adding, and how they approach. So there has to be, in the cloud space, there has to be some kind of strategy created, even for diverse different business teams, so that you end up with the same mindset in terms of how you approach moving your workloads into the cloud space and also securing them. Orchestration has been a big deal, like Jason just stated. Having those tool sets that allow you to automate would actually enhance your migration in a very secure way, and also be able to monitor what's happening from a security perspective in that cloud space.
Perfect. So I think the last question I wanted to cover was more kind of forward thinking. So clouds are evolving very quickly. Security paradigms are evolving quickly. As kind of security experts in the field, where do you see this headed in 6 months or 12 months? And with the goal of folks who are building their solution now, how can they future-proof what they're building? So any thoughts you guys want to share on that? Containers or service meshes or anything that you guys think is where we are headed, and what impact it would have on security and how that should be baked into the design that's being built today.
So, just from, being from some partner sessions and some council sessions, it's funny how we are, how we're changing the way we monitor things and how we do, previously we would log something, it would actually go somewhere, and then we would be analyzing it, post-event. Now we're getting more into like streamline processing, or inline processing. We're actually able to, leverage things like Cloud Functions, or AWS Lambdas or whatever in order to be able to do processing inline. So we actually gather more intelligence before, before the event gets logged. So we're actually, our response times are going to eventually become a lot quicker. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to get away from the traditional aspects of having these huge dashboards where we're constantly looking for something to happen, and more or less become more aware of what actually happened and gather more intelligence from that.
Perfect. Anybody else from the panel?
I can take this one too. So I think that, the cloud enables all of us to move faster. And that includes, both the heavy users, and there's some panelists here, and as well as the vendor to evolve their solutions over time. So that's kind of, the next 6 months are going to be always exciting. That's because everybody can move faster. So, really looking forward to see what the vendors introduce into this space, and kind of, what kind of new ideas they bring to the market.
So I think the one thing I'll add, and both those are both great points, is security right now is, even with moving to the cloud, it's still there's still certain gates that you look at. You're going to do code testing. You're going to do a QA process. With cloud and doing development in the cloud moving so fast now, it can't be about gates anymore. Security solutions have to be aligned and running along with development and workload development and putting up and tearing down workloads. So we just have to make sure that as we build our security solutions and as we build our platforms, that we make sure that security is aligned and moving alongside with development.
Perfect. Jason.
Yeah, so architecturally, from a security architecture perspective, I always like to think about things in layers. And the solutions is never the security program, right? Our security program is never a bucket of vendor solutions that we buy. It's really about what our strategy is, but then architecturally, at the very bottom of that strategy are going to be core things about how we do security incident management. Whether you in-house your SOC or whether you outsource it, we outsource ours to SecureWorks, because that gives us the human analog and the runbook processes, because every solution that we buy is going to generate an event, and then we always have to say, well, what are you going to do with it, right? So it's great to buy a lot of things to generate events, but if you don't have the workforce to actually deal with it, that's a problem. So at the very core foundation, we focused on security incident response with SecureWorks. We focused on security orchestration with ServiceNow, and then event collection with Splunk, and then every solution that we built kind of interplays with all three of those at the bottom tier. So it's really about, what is the foundation architecturally that you're going to build that will eventually support all the security controls that you're going to use.